Sarah ran through the big gates of the mansion as fast as her legs could carry her. Her heart was beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. Behind her, she could hear James shouting her name, but she did not want to stop. She did not want to look back. How could she have been so wrong about everything? The rain started to fall on her face as she reached the road outside the big house. Cars were driving by, and their lights made bright lines in the dark night. Sarah stopped and put her hands on her knees to catch her breath. She was crying and shaking at the same time. The beautiful dress James had bought for her was now wet and dirty, but she did not care anymore. Just 1 hour ago, she thought she was the luckiest girl in the whole world. She thought she was living with a man who had more money than she could ever count. But now, everything had changed. Now she knew the truth, and it made her feel sick to her stomach. Let me tell you how all of this started. Sarah was a simple girl who lived in a small town in Delta State, Nigeria. She worked at a small shop that sold bread and milk and other things people needed every day. Her family did not have much money, but they were happy. Sarah always dreamed of a better life, but she never thought it would happen to her. One day, Sarah was walking home from work when a big black car stopped right next to her. The car was so shiny and new that Sarah had never seen anything like it before. The window rolled down and she saw the most handsome man she had ever seen in her life. He had a nice smile and kind eyes. "Hello," the man said to her. "My name is James. I think you dropped this." He held up a small piece of paper. Sarah looked at the paper and then looked in her bag. She had indeed dropped her shopping list. "Oh, thank you so much," she said, feeling a little shy. "You are very welcome," James said. "I could not help but notice how beautiful you are. Would you like me to give you a ride home?" Sarah felt her cheeks get hot. No man had ever called her beautiful before, especially not a man who looked so rich and important. She looked at the big car and then at James. He seemed very nice, and it was getting dark outside. "Okay," she said quietly, and got into the car. The inside of the car was like nothing Sarah had ever seen. The seats were made of soft leather, and there were buttons everywhere. James smiled at her as he drove. "Where do you work?" he asked. "At the small shop on Market Street," Sarah said. "It belongs to my uncle. I help him sell things to people." "That sounds like honest work. I like people who work hard." As they talked, Sarah learned that James said he was a businessman. He told her he had companies all over the world and that he made a lot of money buying and selling things. He also told her he lived alone in a big house because he had never found the right woman to share his life with. When they reached Sarah's house, James looked at the small building and smiled. "This looks like a happy home," he said. Sarah felt embarrassed because her house was so small and old, but James did not seem to mind at all. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" he asked. Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. This rich, handsome man wanted to have dinner with her. She said yes before she could even think about it. The next evening, James picked her up in his big car again. This time, he took her to the most expensive restaurant in the whole town. Sarah had never been to such a fancy place before. The tables had white cloths on them and flowers everywhere. The food cost more money than Sarah made in a whole week, but James paid for everything without even looking at the bill. "This is too much," Sarah said. "I am not used to such expensive things." "Nothing is too much for a special woman like you," James said, taking her hand across the table. "I want to show you how beautiful life can be." For the next few weeks, James took Sarah to many wonderful places. He bought her pretty dresses and jewelry that sparkled in the light. He took her to movies and concerts and always made sure she had the best of everything. Sarah felt like she was living in a dream. One day, James said to her, "Sarah, I have something important to ask you. Would you like to come and live with me in my house? I know it might seem fast, but I have never met anyone like you before. You make me want to be a better man." Sarah's heart started beating fast. She had been hoping he would ask her this question, but she was also scared. "I don't know," she said. "What will people think?" "Let them think whatever they want," James said. "The only thing that matters is how we feel about each other. I can give you a life that most people only dream about. You will never have to worry about money or work in that little shop again. You can have anything your heart desires." Sarah thought about her small house and her job at the shop. She thought about her family who worked so hard just to have enough food to eat. Then she looked at James, who was offering her a chance at a completely different life. "Yes," she said, "I will come with you." The very next day, James came to pick her up with his big car. Sarah had packed all of her things in 2 small bags. As they drove away from her neighborhood, Sarah looked back at her old life and felt both excited and scared about what was coming next. James's house was not just a house, it was like a palace. Sarah had never seen anything so big and beautiful. There were tall gates at the entrance with guards who opened them when they saw James's car. The driveway was long and had beautiful flowers on both sides. When they stopped in front of the house, Sarah just sat in the car and stared. The house was 3 floors high and had big windows everywhere. There were tall columns at the front that made it look like something from a movie. "Welcome to your new home," James said with a big smile. Inside the house, Sarah felt like she had walked into a different world. The floors were made of shiny marble that reflected the light from the big chandelier hanging from the ceiling. There were paintings on the walls that looked very expensive, and furniture that was so beautiful Sarah was afraid to sit on it. "This is all yours now," James said, watching her look around with wide eyes. "You can go anywhere you want and do anything you like. The only thing I ask is that you be happy." A woman named Mary came to meet them. She was older and wore a black dress with a white apron. "This is Mary," James said. "She takes care of the house and will help you with anything you need." Mary smiled at Sarah and said, "Welcome, miss. If you need anything at all, just call for me." James showed Sarah around the huge house. There was a kitchen that was bigger than Sarah's whole old house. There was a dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. There was a living room with the biggest television Sarah had ever seen. Upstairs, there were many bedrooms, each one with its own bathroom. "This will be your room," James said, opening a door to reveal the most beautiful bedroom Sarah had ever imagined. The bed was huge and had soft pillows everywhere. There was a big closet full of pretty clothes in exactly Sarah's size. "You bought all these clothes for me?" Sarah asked, touching a beautiful blue dress. "Of course," James said. "I want you to have everything you could ever want." That night, Sarah took a bath in a bathtub that was bigger than her old bed. She put on one of the soft nightgowns James had bought for her and looked at herself in the big mirror. She looked like a completely different person. For the first few weeks, Sarah felt like she was living in a fairy tale. Every morning, Mary would bring her breakfast in bed on a silver tray. She could eat whatever she wanted whenever she wanted it. James gave her money to buy anything that caught her eye, and she never had to worry about the cost of anything. James was very kind to her and always made sure she was happy. He would bring her flowers every day and tell her how beautiful she looked. In the evenings, they would sit together and watch movies or just talk about their dreams for the future. But as time went by, Sarah started to notice some strange things about James and the house. Sometimes, late at night, she would hear James talking on the phone in a voice that sounded worried or angry. When she asked him about it, he would just smile and say it was business problems that she did not need to worry about. Sarah also noticed that even though the house was so big and beautiful, some of the rooms were always locked. When she asked James about them, he said they were just storage rooms with old things that were not important. Another thing that seemed odd was that James never had any visitors. For a man who said he had so many business friends, no one ever came to the house. When Sarah asked about this, James said he liked to keep his personal life private. One day, while James was out, Sarah was walking around the garden behind the house when she saw something that made her stop and think. Near the back fence, there was a small building that looked like it might be used for storage. The door was not completely closed, and Sarah could see inside. What she saw made her very confused. Inside the small building, there were old clothes that looked dirty and torn. There were empty food cans and bottles everywhere. It looked like someone had been living there, but not in a good way. It looked like a place where a very poor person might have to sleep. Sarah quickly walked away from the building, but she couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. Why would James keep such a messy place on his beautiful property? It didn't make any sense to her. That evening, when James came home, Sarah decided to ask him about the small building. But before she could say anything, James seemed different. He looked tired and worried, and he didn't smile at her the way he usually did. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked him as they sat down for dinner. "Everything is fine," James said, but his voice did not sound fine at all. "Just some business problems that will be solved soon." Sarah wanted to ask more questions, but something about the way James was acting made her feel like she shouldn't push too hard. So she just nodded and tried to enjoy her dinner, but she couldn't stop thinking about all the strange things she had been noticing. Little did Sarah know that very soon, everything she thought she knew about James and their life together was about to change forever. The truth was much more shocking than anything she could have ever imagined, and when she finally discovered it, her whole world would turn upside down. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find that James had already left the house. This was not normal, because he usually said goodbye to her before going anywhere. Mary brought her breakfast, but even Mary seemed different today. She kept looking around nervously and did not talk as much as she usually did. "Mary, is everything okay?" Sarah asked while eating her eggs and toast. Mary stopped cleaning the table and looked at Sarah with worried eyes. "Miss Sarah, I think you should be careful," she said in a quiet voice. "Careful about what?" Sarah asked, putting down her fork. Mary looked around to make sure no one was listening, then moved closer to Sarah and whispered, "Things are not what they seem in this house. I have been working here for a long time, and I have seen things that do not make sense." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, they heard the sound of James's car coming up the driveway. Mary quickly moved away and started cleaning again, acting like they had not been talking about anything important. James came into the kitchen, but he looked even more worried than he had the night before. His clothes were not as neat as usual, and there was dirt on his shoes. "Good morning, my love," he said to Sarah, but his smile did not look real. "Good morning," Sarah replied. "Where did you go so early?" "Just some business meetings," James said quickly. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Sarah was starting to worry about a lot of things. After James left again, she decided to explore more of the house. She had been living there for almost 2 months, but James had told her that some of the house were being repaired and she should not go there. Sarah walked up to the 3rd floor, which she had never visited before. The hallway was dark and most of the doors were locked, but at the end of the hall there was one door that was slightly open. Sarah walked toward the door, her heart beating faster with each step. When she looked inside, she couldn't believe what she saw. The room was completely empty, except for a few old boxes and some newspapers on the floor. The newspapers looked old and yellow, and when Sarah picked one up, she saw that it was from many months ago. What made Sarah feel scared was what she read in the newspaper. There was a big story about a man who had been stealing money from people by pretending to be rich. The police were looking for him, and there was a picture of the man in the newspaper. Sarah looked at the picture very carefully, and her hands started shaking. The man in the picture looked a lot like James, but his hair was different, and he was wearing old, dirty clothes. The name under the picture was not James either. It said his name was Michael Thompson, and he was wanted by the police for taking money from many people. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. She sat down on the floor and read the whole story. The newspaper said that Michael Thompson would pretend to be a rich businessman and trick people into giving them their money. He would live in fancy places for a short time and then disappear when people found out the truth. "This cannot be true," Sarah said to herself. "James is not like this. He loves me and he's never asked me for any money." But even as she said these words, Sarah started remembering things that had seemed strange before. James never talked about his family or his childhood. He never showed her any of his business papers or took her to meet any of his business friends. And most importantly, Sarah had never actually seen James work or go to any business meetings that seemed real. Sarah put the newspaper back where she found it and ran back to her room. She needed time to think about what she had seen. Maybe it was just a coincidence that the man in the newspaper looked like James. Maybe there was a good explanation for everything. That afternoon, Sarah decided to go into town by herself. James had given her money to buy whatever she wanted, so she took some and asked the driver to take her to the market. She told him she wanted to buy some things for herself, but really, she wanted to ask people questions about James. At the market, Sarah went to the shop where she used to work. Her uncle was very happy to see her, but he looked surprised at how different she looked in her expensive clothes. "Sarah, my dear, you look like a completely different person," her uncle said, hugging her. "This man James must be very good to you." "Yes, he is very kind," Sarah said. "Uncle, do you know anything about James? Has anyone in town talked about him before?" Her uncle thought for a moment. "Well, people do talk about the big house on the hill, but most people say that house has been empty for a very long time. The man who owned it went away many years ago, and no one has lived there since then." Sarah felt her heart sink. "What do you mean the house has been empty?" "The old man who owned that house died about 5 years ago. His family lives in another country, and they never come to visit. People in town say that sometimes they see lights in the house at night, but most of us thought it was just guards checking on the place." Sarah thanked her uncle and left the shop feeling more confused than ever. If the house had been empty for years, how was James living there? And if James was really a rich businessman, why did no one in town know about him? On the way back to the house, Sarah asked the driver some questions too. The driver had been working for James for only a few weeks, just like Mary. When Sarah asked James about his business, the driver said he did not know anything about it because James never talked about work. "He pays me well, so I do not ask too many questions," the driver said, "but I will tell you something strange. Sometimes, late at night, I see him walking around outside the house like he is looking for something. And once, I saw him talking to some men who did not look like business people. They looked more like, well, like people who might cause trouble." When Sarah got back to the house, James was waiting for her in the living room. He looked angry, which was something Sarah had never seen before. "Where have you been?" he asked in a sharp voice. "I just went to the market to see my uncle," Sarah said, feeling a little scared of the way James was looking at her. "I do not like it when you go places without telling me first. There are dangerous people in this town, and I want to make sure you are safe." Sarah wanted to ask James why he was acting so strange, but something about his behavior made her think she should be careful about what she said. That night, Sarah could not sleep. She kept thinking about the newspapers she had found and all the strange things people had told her in town. She also kept thinking about how James had acted when she came home from the market. Around midnight, Sarah heard voices coming from outside her window. She got up quietly and looked out. In the garden below, she could see James talking to two men she had never seen before. The men looked rough and unfriendly, and they were talking in loud, angry voices. Sarah couldn't hear everything they were saying, but she caught a few words that made her very worried. She heard James say something about needing more time and finding another way. One of the other men said something about paying what you owe and no more excuses. After a few more minutes, the two men left and James stood alone in the garden. Sarah watched him and she could see that he looked very upset. He put his hands on his head like he had a big headache, and then he sat down on a bench and did not move for a long time. Sarah went back to bed, but she did not sleep at all. She spent the whole night thinking about everything that had happened. By morning, she had decided that she needed to find out the truth about James, no matter how scary it might be. The next day, while James was out, Sarah went back to the small building behind the house that she had seen before. This time, she opened the door all the way and went inside. What she found made her feel sick to her stomach. The building was full of things that belonged to other people. There were purses and jewelry and watches that looked expensive. There were also papers with different names on them and pictures of different people. Sarah realized that these must be things that James had taken from people he had tricked. In one corner of the building, Sarah found a box full of old clothes that were torn and dirty. These clothes looked like the kind of clothes that very poor people might wear. There was also a mirror that was cracked, and when Sarah looked at herself in it, she saw her own face looking scared and confused. But the most shocking thing Sarah found was a small notebook that had James's real handwriting in it. The notebook was full of names and addresses of people, and next to each name was written how much money James had taken from them. Her own name was at the bottom of the list, but next to her name it said, "No money taken yet, working on long-term plan." Sarah dropped the notebook and ran out of the building. Her hands were shaking and she felt like she was going to be sick. Everything she had believed about James and their life together was a lie. He was not a rich businessman who loved her. He was a thief who was planning to steal from her somehow. But Sarah did not understand how James could steal from her when she didn't have any money. Her family was poor, and she had never owned anything valuable in her life. What could James possibly want from her? As Sarah walked back to the house, Sarah saw Mary standing by the kitchen window. When Sarah saw Sarah's face, she quickly came outside. "Miss Sarah, what is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost." Sarah looked at Mary and realized that Mary might know more about James than she had been letting on. "Mary, you said yesterday that I should be careful. What did you mean?" Mary looked around to make sure no one was listening, then took Sarah's arm. "Come with me," she said quietly.
Mary led Sarah to a small room behind the kitchen that Sarah had never been in before. It was Mary's room, and it was very simple, with just a bed and a small table. "Sit down," Mary said, closing the door behind them. "I am going to tell you something that might be hard to hear, but you need to know the truth." Sarah sat on the bed and waited for Mary to speak. "James is not who he says he is," Mary began. "His real name is Michael, and he is not a rich businessman. He is a man who makes his living by lying to people and taking things from them." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she needed to hear everything. "I have been working for him for only a few weeks. Before me, there were other women who worked in this house, but they all left when they found out the truth about him. The house does not really belong to him either. It has been empty for years, and Michael just moved in and pretended it was his." "But how does he pay for everything?" Sarah asked. "The car, the clothes, the food, all the expensive things." Mary sighed. "He gets money by tricking other people. He finds people who have some money saved up, and he makes them believe that he can help them make even more money. Then he takes their money and disappears. He has done this to many people in many different towns." Sarah felt like her whole world was falling apart. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because I can see that you are a good person, and because I think Michael has a special plan for you that is different from what he usually does. I have heard him talking on the phone about you, and I think he is planning something that could hurt you very badly." Sarah stood up quickly. "I have to leave this place right now," she said. But Mary grabbed her arm. "Wait," she said. "If you leave now, Michael will know that you found out the truth. He might try to stop you, or worse, he might hurt you. You need to be very careful about how you handle this." Just then, they heard the sound of James's car coming up the driveway. Mary's eyes got wide with fear. "He is back," she whispered. "You have to go back to your room and act like nothing has happened. Do not let him know that you suspect anything. I will try to think of a safe way to help you get away from here." Sarah nodded and quickly left Mary's room. She ran upstairs to her bedroom and tried to make herself look normal. When James came to find her a few minutes later, she was sitting on her bed pretending to read a book. "Hello, my love," James said, but she could hear that his voice still sounded worried and tired. "Hello," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. James sat down on the bed next to her and took her hand. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important." Sarah's heart started beating very fast. Did James know that she had found out about him? Was he going to hurt her? "What is it?" she asked, trying to sound calm. James looked at her with serious eyes. "I have been thinking about our future together," he said. "I love you very much, and I want us to be together forever, but I need you to do something for me that will help make our dreams come true." Sarah felt like she could not breathe, but she nodded and waited for him to continue. "I need you to call your family and ask them for some money. I know they don't have much, but I have a business opportunity that could make us all very rich. If your family can give me just a small amount to start with, I can turn it into much more money, and then we can all live happy lives forever." Now Sarah understood what James's plan had been all along. He had never loved her. He had only been kind to her and given her nice things so that she would trust him enough to help him steal money from her family. Her poor family, who worked so hard just to have enough food to eat. Sarah felt angry and hurt and scared all at the same time, but she knew she had to be smart about what she did next. If she let James know that she had found out his plan, he might do something terrible. "How much money do you need?" she asked, trying to sound like she believed him. "Not much," James said, with a smile that now looked evil to Sarah. "Maybe just a few $1,000s to start. Your family can borrow it if they don't have it saved up. Once my business deal goes through, I will pay them back 10 times as much." Sarah nodded like she thought this was a good idea. "Okay," she said, "I will call them tomorrow and ask." James looked very happy and relieved. He hugged Sarah and told her how much he loved her and how proud he was of her for wanting to help their future together. But inside, Sarah was making a plan of her own. She was going to find a way to escape from this house and from James before he could hurt her or her family. She just needed to figure out how to do it safely. That night, Sarah lay in bed, pretending to sleep, while James slept next to her. But really, she was wide awake, thinking about everything she had learned and trying to figure out the best way to get away. She knew that tomorrow everything would change, and she had to be ready for whatever happened next.
The next morning, Sarah woke up very early and went to the kitchen to find Mary. Mary was already there, making breakfast, but she looked scared and worried. "Mary," Sarah whispered, "I've found out the truth about James. His real name is Michael, and he is a thief who steals money from people. I need to get away from here today." Mary dropped the spoon she was holding. "I knew this day would come," she said quietly. "I've been so afraid for you." "Will you help me?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Mary said without thinking twice. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah explained her plan to Mary. She would pretend to call her family and ask for money like James wanted. But really, she would warn her family about James and ask them to send someone to pick her up. When James came downstairs for breakfast, he looked very excited and happy. "Today is the day, my beautiful Sarah," he said, kissing her on the head. "After you get the money from your family, we can start our new life together." Sarah smiled and pretended to be excited too, but inside, her stomach felt sick. After breakfast, James brought Sarah to the big phone in the living room. "Call your family now," he said, sitting down next to her to listen. Sarah picked up the phone with shaking hands and called her uncle at his shop. "Uncle, it is Sarah," she said when he answered. "Sarah, my dear, how are you?" her uncle asked. Sarah looked at James, who was smiling and nodding at her. Uncle, I need to ask you something important. James has a business deal and we need some money to start it. Can you help us with about $3,000? There was a long pause on the phone. Then her uncle said, Sarah, that is a lot of money. Our family does not have that much saved up. And to be honest, something does not sound right about this. Can I talk to this James person? James quickly took the phone from Sarah. Hello, sir. My name is James and I love your niece very much. I have a business opportunity that will make us all rich, but I need just a little money to get started. I promise I will pay you back 10 times more. Sarah could not hear what her uncle was saying, but she could see James getting more and more angry as he listened. You do not understand, James said, his voice getting louder. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. If you do not help us, you will always be poor. Finally, James slammed the phone down hard. His face was red and his eyes looked scary. Your family are stupid people, he said to Sarah in an angry voice. They do not deserve to be rich like us. Sarah pretended to look sad. I am sorry, James. I thought they would want to help us. James stared at her for a long time, and Sarah was afraid he knew she was lying. But then he seemed to calm down a little. It is okay, he said. We will find another way. There are other people I can get money from. Sarah nodded, but inside she was very scared. She realized that James was going to keep hurting people, and she had to do something to stop him. That afternoon, while James was out of the house, Sarah knew this was her chance to escape. She quickly packed a small bag with her most important things and hid it under her bed. But when James came back, he looked different. He looked angry and dangerous, and Sarah knew something bad was about to happen. Sarah, James said in a cold voice, I just had a very interesting phone call. Someone told me that you have been asking questions about me in town. Someone told me that you know things you shouldn't know. Sarah felt her heart stop beating for a moment. I don't know what you mean, she said. Do not lie to me, James shouted, and Sarah had never heard him shout before. I know you went through my things. I know you found the newspapers and the storage room. You know who I really am, don't you? Sarah was so scared she could not speak. James grabbed her arm and pulled her into the living room. Sit down, he said in a mean voice. It is time I told you the whole truth. Sarah sat on the couch and James sat across from her. But now he looked like a completely different person. The kind, loving man she thought she knew was gone. My real name is Michael Thompson, and you are right, I am not a rich businessman, but the story is much more interesting than you think. Sarah listened as Michael, or James, told her a story that was more shocking than anything she could have imagined. 5 years ago, I was the richest man in this whole state. I had 3 big companies, 5 houses, 10 cars, and more money than I could count. I was a real billionaire, just like I told you.
Sarah stared at him with wide eyes. But then I made some very bad choices, Michael continued. I started gambling and I lost a lot of money. I also trusted the wrong people in business and they stole from me. In just 2 years, I lost everything. My companies, my houses, my cars, all my money. Everything was gone. Michael stood up and walked to the big window that looked out at the garden. Do you know what it feels like to go from being a billionaire to having nothing? He asked. Do you know what it feels like to go from living in a palace to sleeping on the streets like a beggar? Sarah felt confused and scared, but also a little sorry for Michael. For 3 years, I lived on the streets, Michael said. I ate food from garbage cans. I slept in doorways when it rained. People who used to call me sir and shake my hand would walk past me like I was invisible. Michael turned around to face Sarah again, and she could see tears in his eyes. I could not accept that my old life was gone forever, he said. So I decided to take it back, even if I had to steal to do it. Sarah finally found her voice. So you started tricking people and taking their money? Yes, Michael said. I would find people who had some money saved up, and I would make them believe I could help them get rich. Then I would take their money and live like a wealthy man again for a few weeks or months. Sarah felt sick thinking about all the people Michael had hurt. This house has been empty for years, Michael explained. The family who owned it moved away, and no one comes to check on it. I broke in and pretended it was mine. I rented the fancy car with money I stole. I hired Mary and the driver and paid them with stolen money. Everything you saw was fake, but it felt real to me. Sarah stood up from the couch. You lied to me about everything, she said. Not everything, Michael said quickly. My feelings for you were real. You made me remember what it felt like to be happy. You made me want to be the good man I used to be before I lost everything. Sarah shook her head. If you really cared about me, you would not have tried to steal money from my family. Michael's face got angry again. Your family is poor and stupid. I was going to make you rich and give you a better life than they ever could. I do not want a life built on lies and stolen money, Sarah said, feeling braver than she had ever felt before. Michael stared at her, and Sarah could see that he was getting angrier and angrier. You are just like everyone else, he said in a mean voice. You do not understand what it means to be truly great. You are happy being small and ordinary. Yes, I am, Sarah said. I would rather be ordinary and honest than rich and fake. Michael's face turned red with anger. Fine, he said. If you want to be poor forever, that is your choice. But you are not leaving this house. You know too much about me now, and I cannot let you tell people the truth. Sarah realized that Michael was not going to let her go. She started backing toward the door, but Michael was faster. He moved to block her way. Mary, she screamed as loud as she could. Mary, help me! Mary came running into the room, and when she saw what was happening, she looked very scared. Mary, call the police, Sarah said. But Michael laughed. Mary works for me. She will do what I tell her to do.
But Mary surprised both Sarah and Michael by saying, No, I will not help you hurt this girl. I have seen you trick too many people, and I am tired of it. Mary ran to the phone and started dialing the police number. Michael tried to stop her, but Sarah grabbed his arm to hold him back. Let go of me, Michael shouted, pushing Sarah away so hard that she fell down. While Michael was fighting with Mary for the phone, Sarah ran toward the front door of the house. But the door was locked, and Sarah could not find the key. Behind her, she could hear Michael and Mary still fighting. Then she heard Mary scream, and Sarah knew Michael had hurt her. Sarah ran up the stairs as fast as she could. She could hear Michael coming after her, and he was shouting angry words that scared her very much. Sarah ran into her bedroom and locked the door, but she knew it would not keep Michael out for very long. She looked around the room for another way to escape, and then she remembered the big tree outside her window. Sarah opened the window and looked down. The tree was close enough for her to reach, but it was very high up. If she fell, she could get hurt very badly. Behind her, Michael was hitting the bedroom door and trying to break it down. Sarah, open this door right now, he yelled. You are only making this harder for yourself. Sarah knew she had to try to climb down the tree. It was her only chance to get away. She climbed out the window and grabbed onto the tree branch. Her hands were shaking, and she was so scared she could hardly think. Slowly, she climbed down from branch to branch. When Sarah was almost to the ground, she heard the bedroom door break open above her. Michael appeared at the window and saw her climbing down the tree. You cannot get away from me, he shouted. I will find you wherever you go.
Sarah jumped down from the last tree branch and started running toward the front gate of the house. Behind her, she could hear Michael running down the stairs and out the front door. Sarah ran as fast as she had ever run in her life. When she reached the gate, she did not stop to open it properly. She climbed over it and kept running down the road. Michael came running after her, but Sarah had a head start. She ran all the way to the main road where there were other people and cars around. A man driving a taxi saw Sarah running and crying, and he stopped his car. "Miss, are you okay?" the taxi driver asked. "Do you need help?" "Yes, please," Sarah said, getting into the taxi. "Take me to the police station as fast as you can." As the taxi drove away, Sarah looked back and saw Michael standing in the middle of the road watching her leave. Even from far away, she could see the anger on his face. At the police station, Sarah told the officers everything that had happened. She told them about Michael's real name, about how he had been stealing money from people, and about how he had tried to stop her from leaving the house. The police officers listened to Sarah's story very carefully. One of them, a kind woman named Officer Johnson, sat with Sarah while she talked. "Sarah, you are very brave for getting away and coming to tell us the truth," Officer Johnson said. "We have been looking for Michael Thompson for a long time. He has hurt many people in many towns." "What will happen to him now?" Sarah asked. "We will arrest him and put him in jail," Officer Johnson said. "He will not be able to hurt you or anyone else anymore." That same day, the police went to the big house and arrested Michael. They also found Mary, who was hurt, but not too badly. Mary told the police everything she knew about Michael and how he had been tricking people. A few days later, Officer Johnson came to visit Sarah at her uncle's shop. "I wanted to give you some news about Michael Thompson," Officer Johnson said. "We found something very interesting when we searched his things.